but it's September. So yeah. All right. We got the right one. So that's good. All right. Welcome, everyone. So Brisbane Azure User Group. Big thank you out there to our sponsors. So before we get going, so Codify, pizza, beer, Microsoft Venue. Thanks, guys. They're what makes this thing possible. So that's awesome. And if you've got things you want to share, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We've got a couple of things coming up, which is really cool. But we've got December. December is one of those ones where if you've got small things, we'd like to get a couple of people together and do a bunch of small things. So come along for December, put your hand up, present something. The email address, it's a bit sluggish. Email address is down there. Let us know. All right, cool. So a few updates. Todd was talking about this today. So dev containers. So there's some new templates out there for Azure SQL that you can take advantage of with dev containers. They're pretty cool. Azure SQL hyperscale named replicas now allow, yeah, it's a big word. so not the primary, but all your other replicas in hyperscale, they now allow you to adjust those maintenance windows of those named replicas. So you can spread that out a little bit. If you're just using Azure SQL, don't worry about it. This is for the hyperscale one. My SQL flexible server now supports HSM. So customer managed keys. Pretty cool.
What's the case with the Chinese managed keys?
Yes, we've got them for you. So Postgres, we've now got Azure Policy support in there. So Azure Policy is amazing for those of you who don't know Azure Policy. It's a great way to put some guardrails and governance into your Azure environment. So that's there for now. Postgres, which is cool. Passwordless authentication with Redis. Sorry, that's a big mouthful. So all of those people who are using managed identities, it's definitely the way to do it. It's really cool. It's now available with Redis. Azure Monitor Container Insights, high scale mode preview, another big mouthful of words. So you have to satisfy a few criteria before you can enable that. But if you do satisfy the criteria, you can get the high scale mode monitoring capabilities, which just makes things a little bit better. What do we got here? Customer planned failover for storage. So you can actually take a hold of your storage accounts and fail that over and test that out yourself now. So, I mean,
that's cool, right?
It's kind of cool.
Because you never really test.
You can never test it in the past. You just kind of had to trust it.
Yeah.
I mean, it pretty much worked, but now you can be really comfortable. So that's cool. Yep. LogicApp standard monitoring dashboards. So LogicApp standard, it's the LogicApp's version that you're basically running on a VM and you're running multiple workflows in your LogicApp. That's the consumption one. So now there's a bunch of dashboards you've got out of the box. Gives you that better visibility. So it's now differentiation for that LogicApp stuff. It's pretty cool. And we've also got the templates for the LogicApps standard. So pre-built, you're able to pick up these things, run with it. It's a little bit easier. APM, I mean, Workspaces is coming in a few of the Azure products that we're now seeing. APM is now coming in with that Workspaces thing. Gives you a little bit of a, differentiation between just the top down. It gives you a little bit more flexibility in how you're managing those APM workspaces. So that gives you a little bit more control, and you can spread that out between, your core team and all your different sub teams for APM. And so on that topic, we've got some code extensions for VS Code. So couple of things you can do there. You can get open API specification file from your code, and then you can generate Markdown as well. So that's pretty cool. All right. So do I throw it over to you? I think I'm going to.
Yeah, I can just.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. I'll just stay here. I partnered with a local people resourcing company, recruitment company, whatever you want to call them, Hudson, Upper Ground by Hudson, they recently renamed to. And we run hackathon events. We run them at least once a year. We're trying to do them more often than that. We have one coming up at the end of September, and it's on Terraform. So a Terraform Basics hackathon and a Terraform Advanced hackathon. So people can come along, try their hand at a series of challenges on the day. It's completely free. They provide all the catering and stuff, so the snacks to get through the hackathon. That's pretty much it. 28th of September, I think it is, on a Saturday. It lasts for about 4 hours. I'll drop a link in the meetup event for anyone who's interested. So
that'd be awesome. Great way to meet like-minded people.
Yeah.
Always a great experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and
awesome.
This time, because if you're going there for the basics hackathon, there's going to be people there who are advanced users as well, tackling that one. And we put a big emphasis on helping each other. Whoever completes the hackathon first, we don't really care. It's who helps the other people the most that we care about. So yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah, awesome. That's always good to hear. All right. So a couple of resources. These ones we sort of call out all the time. So Slack, YouTube, and a couple of training sites to go through. Some blogs that are really cool. If you're interested, make sure you check out these slides. Tonight, without any further ado. Whoa. Oh no. Maybe we do have to have further ado.
Did I wind up hiding the slide by mistake?
I think it just jumped really quick. Oh, I'm just going to
turn that off and turn it.
It's okay, you don't need to. It's okay.
Okay, we got Bronwen. So Bronwen, developer based in Brisbane, doing some really cool stuff in the development space. Really jealous. So Blazor is my love, and I don't get to do much of that at the moment, so I'm really jealous. Microsoft MVP Regional Director, Organiser of DDD Brisbane, Director of Soul Solutions, and WTM Ambassador. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Human technique is ambassador.
And wildlife carer, which is awesome. So this talk we're gonna talk a bit about AI. So from dormant to dynamic, upscaling your documents. Welcome, Bronwen.
Oh no, you didn't. Did you want to play?
Yeah.
You see, using this.
Anyway,
Pleading.
This wouldn't have happened if you had a few more fireworks.
A few more beers, it wouldn't happen either.
That one,
There you go.
right?
oh, yeah, timing this so I can work out how long I take. Thank you all for coming. So tonight we're going to talk about from dormant to dynamics and upcycling your documents using AI. We've all been sold the dream. We've seen some demos from lots of different companies around the place. So you would have seen them. What you have to do these days is drag your PDF documents into the cloud. Then there's a chatbot, and you can ask it anything you want, and it just works. Who's seen those demos? Yeah. Okay. How well does that actually work in reality? So I gave it a test. So my goal here is what we want to do is take all the documents that you guys have, and we want to transform that into data intelligence. But how well does that actually work? So what I did was I took a PhD. Is there any doctors in the room? No doctors, no. So
I've worked with a couple.
You worked with a
I
couple.
learned.
So these documents are big. They're wordy. They're like quite technical. No offense to anyone who's ever written one of these things, but when I read them, there's lots and lots of words, and I end up going blah blah blah. Haven't understood what you've said. They're generally really well written, right? Because they're referenced well. There's appendices, there's citations, blah blah blah. So what I did was I took this one, 357 pages. I did the easiest thing I could do. I dragged it into one of the default Azure AI Studio vector indexes, used the default chat, and off I went. I started asking it questions. I was trying to work out if I could actually understand this PhD now. If you hadn't noticed, that's actually my sister. So I thought I might, endear myself to my little sister. So I sat there a while, asked it a few questions. It kind of seemed okay. I asked it. I found particular pages, and I dived in and asked it questions about different tables, and it seemed to be working. But in the end, I really wasn't quite sure if it was actually accurate. So, because I know the author, I went and sat down with her. So what we did was we asked a few questions, like she asked it, and this was sort of what we found. So, just for reference, her PhD in one line would be sexism against men. So that's like you'll get some of these references through this. So that's good. There's a slide missing. I helped her with this one. So she started with asking so chapter 7 for her is her conclusions, conclusion chapter. So it's the most wordy. We asked her for the 5 specific conclusions from chapter 7. And as it relates to BSBM, HS, and HM, which are acronyms that she uses throughout her document, which are benevolent sexism towards women, benevolent sexism towards men, hostile sexism towards women, hostile sexism towards men. You don't have to read it, but it gave us 5 points. And then I got her to read through it and see what she thought. And for that one, because we were quite specific with the prompting, she said, it's largely correct. What we did then was we went a little bit broader. So we asked her what were the key points from each chapter in her PhD. And this is where I came unstuck, because I read it and went, yeah, it kind of looks right. And she kind of agreed. She's like, it's not incorrect, but it's very broad. Like, it didn't really give you a lot of detail on what she actually found as her conclusions. So then we went with, in chapter 2, what were the top 5 specific findings? So we're trying to get it to be quite specific here. So he gave us 5. Again, you don't have to read them. But and these are her words, and I can try and be like her because everyone thinks we sound similar. So point 1, it's okay-ish. Point 2, she thought was more incorrect. So it was mixing up some of the different terminology. Point 3 was completely incorrect. It was, so what we found when we went through it was using citations in the PhD as her words rather than knowing that was citations. So it completely got it mixed up. And then point 5 was okay-ish. This was her, let's go for a big gun blazing one, is hostile sexism towards men bad? And what it did was it completely got it wrong, because what it did, and so what I did here, I could zoom in, but my pointer is not connected to my computer. What I did was I used I made it show me where it got the information from. So where it pulled its information from was this citation in a PhD. So when, with those academic type works, what they will do is they will list the citation, summarize it, and then talk about how their findings are similar or different. It skipped that bit and just took that as if she wrote it. And we found that quite often when we were questioning it, other than chapter 7, because that was her conclusion. So that was, we actually found that quite interesting. So at the end of it, after, completely kind of making her paranoid, because she's like, did I really say that? I'm sure I didn't write those words. I explained that was quite a basic system and blah, blah, blah. It was interesting to get some quotes from her. So for her, she's like, I wouldn't feel comfortable with anyone using this to understand my thoughts and conclusions. You don't have any control over the way it does interpretation. And it completely misrepresents the research and her thoughts. So she was a bit paranoid. She's like, not that anyone's ever going to read it anyway. But then I pointed out that anyone could do what I just did. So what I did is what a lot of people call a naive or a basic rag. So I didn't do anything special. I just put it through all the defaults, didn't do anything fancy with the meta prompt or anything like that. And that's the result I got. That's a fairly specific type of document. So what we're going to look at tonight, did you want the other one? Sorry, I'll go back for you.
You're right. Thank you. Awesome.
Great.
We're going to cover the first part. So we're going to cover some of the data, the parsing, the indexing, and we'll leave the retrieval LLM prompts and response for a different talk, or we'll be here all night. So what I did next was I thought I'd get something a little bit more interesting. So what I did was I took 5 years of, so I started, again, I don't have my pointer, I grabbed Brisbane City Council, Queensland State Government and federal budgets for 5 years and put them into one index similarly, same sort of thing. Because they're written in a little bit more plain English. Again, I mean, they are quite dry. Anyone ever read those budget papers? No, yeah, exactly. So I did a similar thing there. So this time, because I had lots of documents, I could ask a variety of questions. I could ask it to compare, you know, what's the difference between this budget, between, you know, local, state, federal years, etc. So it did a pretty good job. It was actually quite interesting, but and you've probably come across this if you've used any of the chatbots. Who's seen hallucinations? Yeah. So one I picked up on pretty quick was I asked it about what the LMITO rate for 2024 is, and if anyone remembers the big tax controversy, there was a lower middle tax offset rate that we'd had for ages, and then the government took it away. So I asked it what it was for 2024, knowing full well, according to the ATO, that it finished in 2022. And it incorrectly tells me that it is there for the 2023-24 income year. And then you can see where I got it wrong. When you look at the references, so it looked at the 22-21 budgets and then just assumed it was still there. So that was an interesting one interesting example of where it sort of starts to get things wrong. So my conclusion from that was like, out of the box, it's still not so great. But where does that come from? So documents, there's lots of them. I tried to get some statistics. So we started with paper. People had lots of paper documents, they increased, and then digital came along and just blew it out of the water. I tried to get some statistics. I couldn't find any recent ones, and interestingly, every paper that I found about it, if I dug deep enough, it referred to another paper, which all referred to the paper from 20 years ago. So I'm like, well, that number can't be correct. Like 20 years ago, people are going to be spending different amounts of time, similar to these AI like chatbots that are referring to the wrong documents. So that was interesting in itself. But we've come a long way. Like it's exponentially bigger than it was like in the 60s, right? So before we can think about how the problems that we're going to have with these documents, we need to think about the document structures themselves. I forgot to bring a book with me because that would have been a nice little prompt. But so your typical document has structure generally. So it'll have like a cover, and then it'll have like a title page, it'll have a table of contents, like, depending on what it is, it might have a preface. It has a chapter which has sections and subsections, paragraphs, sentences. You might come to the end and have a conclusion. Then you might have a number of appendices. And then you might, depending on what type of document it is, you might have references. And then you also might have an index, especially the more non-fiction-y type books. And it's interesting to think about whether or not those are still relevant once you are using something like an LLM. Like, do you need all those things? That's a typical document structure. And then within that, because when you think about documents, people still create them like we're going to print them. When was the last time you printed a document that you didn't need to print because it was a wet signature required? Like ages, right? So even though we generally aren't printing anymore, we still make our documents in pages. So within that structure, we still have these artificial pages which have a page header and a bunch of content, and then generally a footer at the bottom. Just because we might print them. That also can lead to some problems when these headers and footers have text in them as well. So that's what, when we think about each of these problems that I'm going to start to show you, you have to think about the types of structures that the documents have been in.
Now, sorry, if you go back to that,
Yep.
The footers
Yeah.
are relating only to those 2 pages or 1 page.
Or it might be every second page, right? You might have a footer that's
Yeah. So if your ingestion doesn't understand the structure, it's all over the shop.
So, and then when we think about other types of documents, so there's not just books and research papers, then we have other things that I'm not even going to go into today. So like a atypical document, like I wouldn't even know how to think about processing a music script or like an online braille that would then later get printed into real braille, or a map. Like they're very specific types of documents. So forget them, because I think they're a whole different ballgame that I haven't even tried. So when you start to look at all these documents and all these structures, we've got to start at the beginning of the pipeline. So just like who's done data pipelines? Ingestion. Yeah, so like a data pipeline, we're going to have a document intelligence pipeline. So we need to start at the data. And with that, we have document management issues. Whose work environment, all their documents everywhere are really nicely filed and catalogued and have lots of metadata? No one, yes. So with document management, we have filing issues. So if you have garbage that goes in, you're going to get garbage out. And no one would give me a screenshot of their SharePoint list. No one volunteered. So I had to think of all the things that I'd seen over the years and summarize it in one example. Some of us may have done a few of these. So I've got here budgets. So we've got a February budget, a January budget, the current budget that's been spelt wrong. And then I've got old budget copy 2. Yeah, see those as well. Then we've got March budget here, and it's Mary's working copy. But it's we're well past March, so then we've got things like the school book list. Somehow ended up in the budget folder. And then the July budget, when you open it up, someone's just created a copy of May budget and renamed it, but you don't know until you open it, right? So you've got all these sorts of problems with your document management system. So if you've got wrong names, you've got incorrect, you don't know which version you're supposed to be using, and errant documents, the sooner you can clean that stuff up, the better. And then if it does get into the system, you need to keep a reference so that you can get it back out and remove it, because you don't want it to sully all your good data. So just like all your data cleansing, you've got to do some document cleansing as well.
But in a practical organisational sense, that's never going to get cleaned up. You're living with it being shitty, to some percentage, and a significant percentage all the time.
Yeah, so you've got to have a goal to be able to clean it up. But you have to have a way, if you identify a document, so say you're doing your search and you find that it's telling you the current price of the budget for the year happens to be the price of whatever the donuts are at the school, and then you look at the reference, you see it's school tuck shop list or whatever, then you can flag that and someone can pull it out, right? It can be an ongoing, you don't have to do it all up front. But the sooner you can get it, the less
But if we're feeding this into our own LLM, we've got troubles on how we pull it out later on.
Yeah, you need to be able to pull it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas, okay, and just with PhDs, the published version of a PhD, for all its complexity, has been edited to within an inch of its life. It's 3 years of writing and editing effort. And
it's been peer reviewed by 10 people
before it's actually published.
Yeah.
So working on PhDs, and there's a number of startups working only on reading PhDs and trying to provide value, even for the complexity you experience, may actually be a cleaner data source than almost anything else we might ever strike.
Yeah, possibly. And then it comes down to it comes down to requirements, right? Similar to your data pipelines, it's what data quality is acceptable, right? And it might be that it's okay because the users are internal, it's low risk, they know that it's bad, so they don't trust it, but it gets them some sort of time warp in their data, saves them sometimes, so it's okay. It's like a balancing act, right?
Thank you.
So after you've hopefully cleaned up some of our data, the next thing we have to do is parse it and ingest it. So that's the next part. So when it comes to documents, there's lots of different formats, right? So you have PDFs, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all the different types of images. I'm not going to cover all of them tonight. The main ones I want to touch on is the main one is PDF and then a little bit of images because they kind of interrelate. And there's probably more formats as well. Like these are very much right. So we've just talked about all that amazing structure that a document has. If you've used Word, you know that there's headings, there's all sorts of structure in a Word document. For a PDF, not all PDFs have a structure, and not all the structures are created equal. So you'll generally, like, you may have come across and you try to copy paste something out of a PDF and you can't select it, and it ends up it's essentially an image. A lot of the time, if you open it in Adobe, you can tell if it's tagged PDF equals yes, it'll generally have a lot more structure to it. If it says no, you're pretty much in a lot of trouble and you're back to images, essentially. But that's where it gets quite tricky. So if we think back to that budget example I had, so when I looked at my sister's PhD, querying things about the charts and stuff, it seemed to work quite well because the way PhDs are written, they summarize the chart very, very well in text. Normal people, we get a bit lazy and we'll make a chart because it's supposed to talk to itself, right? You don't generally put a lot of words around. So I found that with the budgets as well. So this is the women's budget for 2024-25. I picked out this page because it had a nice chart and it had a chart with text. And I decided to ask it some questions. So I asked it in the latest federal women's budget, what's the median superannuation balance for 50 to 54-year-old? So it actually, it grabbed the right document, it found the right page, it found the right chart 3.3, but it couldn't give me an answer. It just said that the superannuation balance and gap to male median superannuation balance as a percentage of male median birth. So it didn't get really far because it can't really read it, because you'll see it here, and I'll give you another example. So what I did, that was the default sucking from Azure AI. What I did was I took like a basic parser read it in its default simple sort of text format to see what it looked like. So when it parsed this page, what it did was the figures in the table, so the dollar figures are there, then the percentages, then it's got some of the axes down here. So you can imagine that when it sucks that in, good luck trying to guess what belongs to what. So I've read that, and then I've asked it the same question using that default parser. It did a little bit better because it's a slightly like there's a myriad of different PDF parsers that you can try. But what it did when it read this particular parser, even in that format, it kind of got it right. So this one said for the 50 to 54-year-old woman, it said it was $97,000 and 32.8%. And I think that's because this one doesn't have a male gap in the superannuation, so it's got like an off by one matching error. So it did a little bit better, that parser. So what I picked was a different parser that is this one, Llama parser. So it specializes in specifically PDF table type stuff. So when I use Llama parse, which is done by Llama index guys, when they read it in, this is how it sees it when you print it out. So it looks a lot more like the table. So then once I've done that and spit that into the index and ask it the same question, it gets it correct. So that's a table, that's a chart table. It has a lot of text. So here's my second example. So same budget paper, but this time they don't have any text on the axes here. So here what they're doing is they're comparing 2002 to 2022, then the hours per week spent on unpaid caring between men and women. So here I've asked the fourth one, how many hours does a 46 to 50-year-old spend on unpaid caring work? And because there's no text, as you can see, this is not what it sees, you can't see that picture at all. So it has no idea. So all it does is kind of summarize the text that's in there, which hasn't got any specifics. So in a lot of the new models, they have a thing called multimodal. So up until now, we've just started, we've fed it in text. Multimodal allows us to give it images and text. So what we're going to do for this chart is we're going to take that PDF, we're going to page it out as JPEGs per page, and then we're going to give it the image so it can try and interpret the graph as an image as well as the text. So what we do here, using the llama parse again, we tell it that we've given it a women's budget statement. We're going to use the OpenAPI GPT-4o, which is the one that allows this multimodal feature. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to parse out the document into JPEGs, and like this is what it did to my computer. For every page, there's like 90 of them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go through and get that chunking of the text, and we're going to associate the text and give it the metadata of the image so they link together, and give it to the index down here. And then we're going to be a little bit fancier with our prompt. We're going to tell it that we're giving it markdown and text and images, and that you need to use the image first and only use the text information if you can't understand the image. So it's going to try and interpret the picture. Can't, it's going to go to text. And then this is my code. Well, I've copy pasted their example essentially, but this is their code to create this multimodal query so that you can join the nodes and you have the image documents linked with the text and pull it out as one so I can print out what you can see. So, so I asked the question again. This one I asked a bit more non-specific, so I want to see where it goes. So I asked it in the latest women's budget, how many hours does a 46 to 50-year-old, so no gender, spend on unpaid care work? So it 46 to 50-year-old, it says 24 hours a week in 2022. So, and then it knows that it's the right chart. It knows it's on page 31. And the breakdown of unpaid caring by sex and age. So it has read the chart correctly. When I first glanced at it, because I went with non-specific, I was like, oh, 24 might be about right. But when I looked at it, it really should be in the high 20s. So it didn't. I don't think it quite got that one correct. So I decided, let's be very specific and ask it for the men specifically. So for this one, it's come back and said in between on that 2 years, it was 24 hours for both. So this is the correct one over here. So they were different. And I think it's read one of these two instead. So then I went, does it do any better with the women? And the answer was no. The women's one was quite similar together, but it's decided 38 and 30, which to me looked like it actually picked up the 56 to 60-year-olds. So this is where testing and like verification comes in. So it did better in that it could read something. It got the wrong answer. So is that better than not giving you any answer? And that'll depend on your use case, right? So that's why you have to try with all the different documents and the different parsers. But it gives you another option if you can't get to the text. And this graph is like, it's pretty hard to read as well. So I was like, but a human, I think a normal human can do it. Bus timetables. Does anyone remember paper bus timetables? Remind me, anyone old enough? So this is the Route 66 bus timetable. So it goes along the busway out to UQ. And I think this one's a really interesting one because it's got table information, which is kind of cool. But I think it's a good example of other sorts of tables you'll see in people's documents, right? So it's got things that aren't in the table format. So it's got all these text bits here because people don't when humans make a table in a document, they skew it. So, and I think this format is very unique to Southeast Queensland because I looked at all sorts of overseas timetables and no one else did this. Like they literally printed every single time. So us, because we are lazy, that's me, right? We were just like, once you get to here, it's in for 10 minutes. Like, don't make us print it 50 pages wide, right? So I thought this would be a really interesting one to give to the LLM and the parser to see how it went. So I started with asking it what all the stops were from the University of Queensland to the RBH on a weekday. So there's quite a bit of context there. You have to pick because it's got the to the from timetable instead of weekday and a weekend timetable, and it correctly picked out all the stations. And what I found interesting was it took out like a little, you can see like the ABC, and then it took out the little codes at the end, and it just summarized them as station names. I was like, well, that's pretty neat. Got that right. I asked it what bus and time leaving the cultural centre would get me to King George Square by 9:30 on a weekday. So it has to get the right timetable. Like weekday, it has to know the from and to stops, and it has to get me there before the time I specified. And it said I have to get the King George Square by 9:30, catch the 66 cultural centre at 9:24, which was the correct time. So there's quite a bit of inference there, I think, as well. Yeah, this one was interesting when I asked it for all of the times from the University of Queensland on a weekday from the Roma Street stop. It got this completely wrong for some reason. That's the right line here. The times it spat out the Marta Hill up to the point that it does it every 15 minutes, and then it goes down to this one.
Just going back one or two slides. Previous ones. Is that timetable at the time fit within the black spot? One of the.
No, so it's the one over here.
Okay.
9:24. So.
Yeah. Okay. So
I don't have my printer. Software isn't on.
It's printed. It's not. It's not a.
It's picked that one correctly.
Okay.
That one. Yeah. So it gets the completely wrong two lines, and it switches lines once it hits this every 15 minutes thing. So then that was with the standard parser. So I thought that was pretty good at the box. So then I tried it with the llama parse. And then I asked the same question. So all the other ones I got right again. And then this one I asked it again. And this one it got right. But it didn't fill in these gaps for me. So it just told me what was in the table. And then I got tricky and I asked it for something that would be in the middle here somewhere. But it stuffs it up and says I should catch the 10 o'clock one, which is the last one. And it didn't calculate it correctly. However, this is where I think if you'd spent time on the master prompt giving it maybe some 1 or 2 shot examples to say, you know, if you hit something like this, then you add 10 minutes, it might have improved. But this was the out of the box query after I've done a parse. So it's further down the chain that you might be able to fix this one up. So that's a couple of examples there. Now, when you're thinking about ingesting stuff, you're going to be getting, depending on what your documents are, you can be getting all sorts of stuff, right? Like you could be getting driver's license, passports, flight information. Before you ingest it and put it in a database and vectorize it or use it to train your model, think about the personal identifying information. And if it should go in, or if you need to redact it before you use it. This tool here that Microsoft put out is pretty cool, actually. So they've got one that, there's one for normal stuff, but there's one for chat as well. So if you've ingested a chat, it's quite neat in pulling out phone numbers. So you've asked for the phone number, and the person's been sneaky about it and said, like, it's George, and then Gmail, and like it redacts that for you. So a good one if you want to like pull out some of the information, because you don't want to like be giving out other people's phone numbers and stuff to your end users. So think about that as part of your ingestion pipeline as well. So to summarize a bit of that, most of these parsers will baseline at the page level. And it's a pretty good way to baseline, but generally you want to keep your content flow together. So I think back to when I was a little kid, you know, it was a bit of a bookworm, and mum would be like, 1 more page. And like I'd be reading, and the Bob went to here, and well, I can't stop now. I have to turn the page and finish the sentence. And like, no, I have to finish the paragraph, right? So you don't want to, you want to keep your content together, because otherwise it may not find it. Because if you're breaking your tables, if you're breaking your content flow, the indexing may not find what you're looking for. So think of it in back to the sections. Like it's a bit like, you know, the reason our roads are a certain width and the railway tracks are a certain width was based on the width of 2 horses, right? We're still stuck in that archaic thing with pages when we're thinking about the printing press, right? So forget pages and think about keeping the content flow together. I've got a reference later. There's a few different parsers that will help you with that, so you can go through and do section rather than by page.
So that's an option you specify.
You'll do use a different parser and you'll tell it to pick it by section rather than, and then you can specify like if you want to do a page. Oh, sorry, if you want to do like a chapter, or do you want to do a paragraph, or do you want to do a sentence? And so you can work out like how you want, but then it keeps the life content together. And so then there's a bunch of different custom parsers. The one I've been playing with for doing sectioning is LLM Sherpa. There's a few others around. And then, when you're doing this, you have to think about your documents. So you're not going to grab all the documents on the internet, hopefully, and put them into your index. Yours should, like, generally you're going to be parsing something similar or in like areas. So be content specific. So is it documents full of code? Is it documents full of text? Does it have images? And like work out which parsers work for each of the different types of stuff. So the next part is the index. So when everyone talks about index, usually they're talking vector index. But my first question to you is, do you need to put it into a vector index? Once you've parsed it, what is your requirement? A lot of people just stick it in the index, but they don't actually need it there. They've taken it and they might want to grab a summary of the document and put it in their database. Well, then you don't need to put it in a vector. They might want to do something with it and stick it in a report. So you may not even need a vector index to start with. It comes down to your requirements. But also, similarly to a database, a lot of the time you won't just have one index in your database. You might want to look up by the primary key. You might want to look up by, like, because you're searching by people's names all the time, you might want to index by name, you might want to index by birth date, blah, blah, blah. Similarly, you might want to do multiple vector indexes on all your documents. Like you might want to have a vector index for years, and you might want to skew by like levels of government, you might want to do by areas or something like that. So you don't have to just have one. Similarly to how we added the images to the document metadata, we can also add other metadata. Again, because you're not just downloading everything off the internet. Normally you know something about these documents. You might know the customer. You know a lot of other information about them that isn't necessarily in the document. Attach some of that metadata into your index and it'll increase the different ways that you can search and join information. I definitely recommend storing your source documents. I've seen a lot of people saying, hey, we passed it, we put it in a vector index, I can delete all those PDFs now. No, because you want to keep them in case you ever have to do it again. And generally people might want to read the document and maybe print it. So you need the original. And then to flip this as well, think about the relationships that are in your documents. Like depending on what type of document they are, it might suit your knowledge graph better. So my example for you now is graph rag. So instead of just doing a vector index, we're going to look at graph, which will explain this example using the 3 little pigs. Is everyone familiar with the 3 little pigs? Okay, so this is a 2-page document of text of the story of the 3 little pigs. Again, you don't have to read it. So 3 little pigs, straw, they call it birds and some of it like sticks, and bricks. The wolf tries to blow them down, succeeds on the first, fails on the third. But in this story, he then, with the 3rd little pig, tries to trick him, right? Tells him there's some turnips, tries to get him to go to the fair, and then in the end, he tries to break into his house by climbing down the chimney. The little pig sets up a thing of water, he falls in, he puts the lid on, he boils him, and he cooks him, so it's the darker pig story. Maybe not all the 3-year-olds read this one. But it's a small amount of text, and it's easy to check, so when we go through this. So the idea of graph rag is we want to pull out all of the different entities and then the relationships between them and then feed that into the index. So if I start with the default naive rag and how it interprets that story, so I gave it the story and I asked it, so in the story, the little pig goes to the fair, he freaks out, jumps in the butter churn and rolls down the hill. And we knew that the wolf had told him the fair was at Shanghai. So we asked the LLM, where was the butter churn located? And he has no idea. It said that the little pig bought a butter churn at the fair, not mention where the fair took place or where the butter churn was located after Little Pig bought it. So it doesn't have any idea. Then we asked the LLM before we did graph rag, look, how many men are in the story? So the first little pig gets the straw from the man, the second little pig gets the furs from the man, the third little pig gets the bricks from the man. They're like, the story of the three little pigs is about three little pigs and a wolf, not men. Okay. So I take the graph rag and I give it that story, and what it does is it spits out all the entities and all of the relationships. So the first one here is what they call the nodes. So here we've got Shanklin, and it has a type. So we've got geo, we've got events, we've got people. So it's got Mary Garden, the fair, the pig, bricks, the third little pig is the person doesn't go down to animals. So it spits out all of those, and then it spits out the relationships. So for instance, the wolf and the little pig, the data provided two entities, the wolf and the little pig, and it tells you how they interacted. So here, the little pig was getting apples. The little pig attempts to complete task of getting apples. So what I did, because that's really hard to read, this might be a lot better because I can't zoom, sorry. I put that into a mermaid diagram so you can see. Then I color coded it. So like the blue was people, the pink was events, the yellow was geography, and white didn't have anything. And then this was like the relationships. And as you can see, with just that 2 short pages of text, like the graph is pretty big. So you can imagine how massive this would get with a big document. But this was nice to be able to test. So I did that, turned that graph, spat that back then into the index, and then we can ask it questions again. So we're going to now again ask where the butter churn was located. Here it was like no idea. Here it's the story of the little pigs. The butter churn was bought by the little pig at the fair, data entry number 15. The location of the fair is mentioned as Shanklin, number 20, and it is also referred to as the fair, number 23. So therefore it can be inferred that the butter churn was obtained at the fair in Shanklin. All right. How many men are in the story? And I thought this one was going to be interesting because it only refers to the man, so I wasn't sure what it was going to say. So there's only one man mentioned. It doesn't say if it's the same man or if there are 3 different men. It's saying, but yeah, one man mentioned in sort of the 3 little pigs, data entry number 20, number 2. The man provides the first little pig with straw, the second little pig with furs to build their houses. So improved, pretty cool. So that's a different option as well. So if you've got like, I found this like interesting for things like you're looking at like court transcripts, police reports, like anything that involves people and events, having that extra relationship information can really enhance the way that you query it. So that's where we end with our journey. I just wanted to quickly touch on what the next steps might be. And this depends on what you're doing. So after you put it into whatever index, and that may be a database, you've got to get it out. So what retrieval method are you going to use? Are you going to use a dense retrieval? Are you going to like combine? Are you going to do a traditional search and combine them together? There's lots of good articles on that. Prompting, like there's many talks on LLM prompts. That you've got your meta prompts, and then you've got like the users prompts themselves. Look at how you want to do that, and then how are you going to respond with a user? Are you going to use a chatbot or an agent? And where I'm going with this is look beyond the chatbot, please. So if I've given you a database, do you really want to have a chat with the database and ask it questions all day to get your information? Or do you want me, with my knowledge, the database, to produce your report? So you can have highlights and stuff like that, rather than having to sit there and try and ask it things and glean information. Like think beyond just the chatbot when you're doing these things. For me, across all of this stuff, when you're doing it, I highly recommend looking at some of the responsible AI, and like I would go further and say just responsible technology, because it's the same principles when you're building these things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. If you've never done any of like the assessments and stuff before, the Microsoft responsible AI toolkit, there's a bunch of guides and templates that can really help get you started when you're coming to assess the impacts, like, you know, what you should and shouldn't do, what the levels are, red teaming, blah, blah, blah. Like, have a look at this. It'll help get you started. But the one I wanted to show you specifically was their content filtering. So I'll go through the questions in a minute, but it has a specific content filtering that you can apply to the indexes. I've set it on media, like just the default for this. And then you can, there's each category. So there's a violence, a hate, sexual, self-harm. And you can move them however you want. And you do it on the way in, for getting into the index, and also for getting out. So on medium, as I ask more pertinent questions, it gets interesting. So I decided not to do this with my sister's PhD thing, you guys, because I could probably maybe get myself banned. So I decided to go back to the 3 little pigs, but you can like think about the sort of questions that people might have asked. And if you want to like chat later, I can do that. So it's like, what happened when the little pig got a churn? And it's like, yeah, all good. How would I frighten a wolf? It was fine with that. They want to ask, how would you kill a wolf? Even though the story like talks about like the little pig killing the wolf, it's like, sorry, I cannot provide the instructions how to kill a wolf, and it would be against my program. That's on medium. You can adjust that. So what I did was I made it super sensitive and re-asked the same question. It was like, prompt triggering, you know, big trouble. Why this is important, other than thinking not just about you users, like how you want them to experience, but also you may get tripped up with some of the documents that you feed in if it's too sensitive. E.g. again, court transcripts, police reports, medical reports, things that have like nasty words in them and nasty concepts can get triggered by this stuff on the way in. So you might have to fiddle with it a bit to get it right. And then once you get it in, you may need to set the stuff that comes out differently depending on the types of user, because you might want the police officer to be able to ask lots of like in-depth questions, but you may not want to like Joe Public to be able to get really gory details out, right?
Is the responsible AI assessing it on the way in to make it cleaner, or is it
both? Both. So you can set it on like in and out.
Yeah.
And the categories that they had, those are the other box ones.
Yeah.
Like, is there any like global? Those categories are based on some other global initiative with regards to what responsible AI should be looking at, or
yeah, so I believe like there's lots of consortiums, right? Yeah. And Microsoft would definitely like they put it by default on. So like if you use the Azure OpenAI one, you'll have the responsible AI stuff turned on by default, as opposed to using just like the the normal ChatGPT one, right? But yeah, they got it on by default. Others don't. So yeah, you might have to work out which one to use. But
I was more interested in the categories that the development if there was something.
The high level, like the low level.
Yeah, by what it has learned and for the lines to be other initiatives, so we can apples and apples when we talk policies or responsible AI across different vendor technologies.
Yeah, I haven't tried going deep with others as much. Like this one I found was quite reasonable, and I can give you some specific examples afterwards.
Well, I give an example since ChatGPT. I asked a question about what a PowerShell to delete all active users from Active Directory, and he came back with the script.
Yeah.
Colleague asked Copilot, and Copilot told him to go off and find a PowerShell SME before, and it wouldn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then like if you go through that responsible AI stuff, like there's a bunch of stuff around the team as well. So like looking at like if the user asks them in a different way, like, well, yes, I understand you can't do that, but what if I need to write like this? I need to do this thing, and then it might like Scott Hanselman's like classic example is like ask it to give you a hot dog recipe, right? And by default, GitHub will be like, I write code. It's like, well, what if I had to write a program, and then it'll give you a hot dog recipe, right? So that whole red teaming type thing, like if you look through those things as well, and like they have a bunch of test suites, they're quite interesting to go into. And again, you've got to work out what the right level for your content and different user types are, because obviously some people need to see the right.
There used to be art in bypassing the policy governance like parenthesis, full stops, and other things of that nature. Do you know if these policies are still exposed to those sorts of trickeries?
I think they've got a lot better than originally. I haven't seen any specifics. I don't know if you have. Did you see anything? No.
So,
But yeah, and then you can do specific stuff as well. I haven't got an example there, but like e.g. you can set it like they also have like block content. So like e.g. you can set up words and regex as like specific for your thing. So like I haven't got a screenshot, but I did like I wanted to make butter churn a bad word. So then like you use that as like can't you know get anything out of it. So if you had something that was very different to theirs, like connected to the work policy or something like that you want people chatting about, then you can like block certain terms as well. That's kind of neat.
So if you had a specific industry case, and I'm thinking more around safety, and you're wanting to allow ingestion of a whole thing's related to certain safety incidents of what people might do, and like safety, the end result is something disastrous and some person was hurt in certain ways. So you want all that front end content to get in there. You want to be able to make that association. Do you think there's enough flexibility to allow?
Yeah, so you can be flexible on the way in and then tight on the way out.
Okay.
So like you can let the content in so that it can find the right information, but what it says back to you, and again, I can give you an example later, it is a little bit more filtered.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I can give you an example later. What I wanted to do is last example for as an audience participation. So again, thinking beyond the RAG chatbot. So this is a hypothetical company. We are a full life service company. We do everything about people's lives. And what would you do with this document intelligence? So you're a staff member at this life service company, and the little pig has just given you his story, which is really sad. You could be any sorts of industry about this person's life. What sort of amazing document intelligence and things could happen now that he's given you his story and that has been entered into the system? Anyone want to give me some suggestions? Everyone's quiet.
Or explain the scenario again.
So you're a life service company. So like you are an estate lawyer. You're an insurance like broker. You are like counselling services. Like what sorts of things would you maybe like want to glean from this report that you just heard about this poor little pig?
For insurance, yes, diseases and all, what is
Insurance risk.
risks?
You go back to the insurance. Yeah, should you contact his insurance company and say, hey, his house survived the wolf. Maybe he should get a discount. Yeah.
Pathological killer.
Yeah.
So psychology, the thing against wolves.
Yeah. And yours was this, talk to the estate lawyer.
Information.
Do you believe the only
Yeah, so you've got his mum who's just lost 2 of her children. She probably needs to update her will. He now has 2 less siblings, depending on if he has to do dependents. Maybe he needs to think about his estate planning as well. Yeah, anything else?
He's got PTSD from the wolf.
That's right. So he's got PTSD. You might need to like refer him to some sort of counselling, right? Because the story says he lives happily ever after, but I'm kind of like, just lost half his family. And like suffered like this wolf stalking him.
nice suit?
I think there's a lawsuit against wolves.
Lawsuit, yeah. So you're going to sue well, he just ate the wolf, so you can't sue the wolf, but maybe you could sue the wolf's family. Yeah. Anything else?
There's lots of money to be made.
Lots of money to be made, right? So here, this was like a couple of quick ones I have was like estate planner for the little pig in the sow.
Market size. What's the market size in any one of these things?
I said you're a full life service company, you're a fictitious company. Yeah, you might need to go like your security company that's on your books. You might get them. You go fix up his security because the wolf just climbed down his chimney, right? Like you've got to stop that. Now he's got that butter churn. You might need to go look into a small business permit for making and selling butter at your house because it's probably violating some sort of ordinance. Your insurance company with the huffing and puffing. You might need a defense attorney. So, like, the wolf climbed down the chimney, he fell into the pot that he put there, and then he ate him. Is that reasonable force? Like, does he maybe need to be worried about getting arrested as well?
Accidental.
Cannibalism.
Yeah, was it self-defense? Was it too far? Like, it was interesting chatting to the chat thing about it because it was just like, no, the little pig is the good guy. Like I couldn't get it to see it in the wolf size. Like this poor like dude, I tried to clean his like chimney and ate him. Like what? Yeah, and obviously like this just gone through some horrific events. Maybe there's some counselling and stuff it needs. Yeah, insurance update. You know, there's all sorts of stuff that you could do. But you don't want to do that by asking it. You want that information like notified to you, right?
The wolf was running to be the next president of the US.
Absolutely. Yeah, so as you can see, we went through a lot of slides tonight. So we looked at cleaning up your data. We looked at a bunch of different things that might trip you up with PDF. So tables, charts, all those sorts of fun things. Is the PDF even text? We looked at indexing, and my top takeaways for you are, so like a good data pipeline, make your knowledge pipeline interchangeable. So at the moment, you might need a piece for every little part of your pipeline, and as things get better, you may end up just being able to drag and drop that document in the future and it just work. But if you make it like a good data pipeline, you can flip these things out as things get better. You might find there's better ingestion, there's better indexing stuff in the future. So make it interchangeable. Pick the best tools for each use case. So one type of parser will work for a particular type of document. A different parser might work for a better one. So switch and swap, do some that you'll have to do some testing, and then expect things to change and improve. Like we're only sort of just starting on that. We've come a long way since the original like document content management services that we had a few years ago where we'd pick keywords. There was no vectors. Like it was
Syntax SharePoint.
yeah. So things have got better, and I think they will only get better over time. So that links to like a page in my references. It's got a bunch of the PDF parsers, and I've also done a bunch of blog posts around some of these examples I've given you tonight. And then if you want to ask me questions. But yeah, thank you very much.